If you're an older adult, you might have heard all about the benefits of the keto diet, like it'll help you lose body fat, get toned, improve your blood sugar levels, and more. But are those claims true? That's exactly what we're going to cover in this video. In more detail, here's what you can expect to learn. First, I'll explain what we actually know about the keto diet, and just as importantly, what we don't know. Then we'll give a definition of the keto diet so we're all on the same page. After that, we'll discuss three common claims and evaluate, are those claims true? Are they unique to the keto diet? And so on. Just as importantly, we'll talk about who should not do the keto diet. There are dangers to the keto diet that certain people will do worse on than people without those conditions. And lastly, we'll draw some final conclusions about should you do the keto diet or should you find other ways to accomplish your goals. Before we jump in, who am I? My name is Igor. I'm the author of 13 books on exercise and nutrition, including 4 Amazon bestsellers. As well, I've been a personal trainer since 2006 with a specialty in older adults, and I've been training other personal trainers in my methodology by presenting at some of the world's largest personal training conferences since 2013, and I've delivered over 400 wellness presentations to some of Canada's largest corporations like IBM, Bosch, American Express, University of Toronto, Investors Group, and others. Now, here is the disclaimer. First of all, there are no long-term studies on the keto diet specifically in seniors or older adults. There are studies in women, there are studies in men, but not specifically in older adults. So the research here comes from the general public, not specifically seniors, but we assume it's probably, seniors are still people, so it's still probably true. So first, what is the keto diet? Simply put, the keto diet is a ketone-producing diet. And I realize it doesn't help when I use the word ketone in the word to define the word keto. So I'll explain what ketones are in a second. It is designed to induce a metabolic state called ketosis, and it contains a moderate protein intake, high fat, which is the hallmark of the keto diet. By high fat, we mean more than 60% of the daily calories. It's also low carb, specifically under 50 grams of carbs per day. And what differentiates the keto diet from other low carb diets is that most low carb diets are between 50 and 150 grams per day. The keto diet would be classified not as a low carb diet, but a very low carb diet. And so what are ketones? Ketones are, simply put, an alternate fuel source. They are an alternative to glucose. The body burns 2 fuel sources primarily to stay alive. One is sugar, which is glucose. The other is fat, like ketones. And so there is a period called metabolic adaptation where ketones serve as the other fuel source when carbohydrate intake is limited. It's not necessarily the preferred fuel source. Carbohydrates or glucose are the preferred fuel source, but it is an alternative fuel source. Ketogenesis is in the absence of sufficient carbohydrates, the liver produces ketone bodies. These are chemicals that, again, serve as an alternate fuel source. And ketones are transported to various tissues where they are readily converted into energy. Okay, now how do you know if you're in ketosis? There are 3 main ways to measure ketosis, and one of them is the best way. 1, you can measure ketones in the blood. 2, you can measure ketones in the breath. And 3, the most accurate, you can measure it in the blood. You know you're in ketosis when your ketone levels are more than 0.2 millimoles per liter. Most people on a mixed diet that's balanced, proteins, carbs, and fats, will have less than 0.1 millimoles per liter of ketones in their blood. So let's talk about the common claims of the keto diet. One is that the keto diet helps with insulin resistance. And here's why people say that this is true. In theory, type 2 diabetes is high blood sugar. So if we restrict sugar in the form of a low-carb diet, we solve the problem of high blood sugar. Now, to evaluate whether this claim is true, a lot of the research is done on something called HbA1c. So what is HbA1c? This is simply the average blood sugar over the last 3 months. And I'm just saying this because in the upcoming slides, we'll talk a lot about HbA1c, so I don't want you to be lost. So here's one study of 12 weeks on a keto diet. This is titled Effects of the Ketogenic Diet on Glycemic Control, Insulin Resistance, and Lipid Metabolism in Patients with Type 2 Diabetes Mellitus. The results were this. The keto diet group reduced their HbA1c by 1.02% more than the control group. So that's pretty good. Does that mean that the keto diet works to improve insulin resistance? Yes, it does. So yeah, no question, does it work? The next question we have to ask is it superior to other diets that also lower A1C, or is it the only way to lower A1C? Well, no, it's not the only way. There are other ways. So in terms of nutritional variables that have an effect on insulin resistance and A1C, the single most important variable isn't carbohydrates. That's only the third most important variable. The single most important variable is actually total calories. In studies where total calories are normalized, A1C drops by between 4 and 5%. You could literally normalize your blood sugar with just optimizing your total calories and not even touching your carbs. The next most important variable is the total fiber intake. Improving fiber intake in people with insulin resistance decreases A1C by 2.5%. And again, the third most important variable is your carb intake. So the difference in A1C between a high carb diet and a low carb diet of the same calories is 1.0%. And finally, glycemic load, which a lot of people call glycemic index, but they're not the same thing. It's not really clear how much of an effect it has on A1C, but even if it does, it's a fairly minor variable that it's not even worth worrying about. Here's one study titled The Effect of Short Periods of Caloric Restriction on Weight Loss and Glycemic Control in Type 2 Diabetics. The researchers divided participants into 3 different groups. Group number 1 was just given diabetic advice, but that advice was not enforced. Whether the people followed that advice or not was up to them, and for the most part, they didn't follow it. Group number 2, they ate 1,500 to 1,800 calories per day once a week. The other 6 days per week, they ate their normal calories. Group number 3 ate 15 to 1,800 calories per day once a week for 5 days in a row, okay? And here is what happened. After 20 weeks of this, group number 3, they actually normalized their blood sugar. Not everybody, but a large percentage of people in group 3 normalized their blood sugar just by normalizing their calories. That's all they did. They just reduced their portions. They didn't restrict their calories. They did restrict their calories. They didn't restrict their carbs. They didn't restrict their fats. They just reduced calories, and many of them normalized their blood sugar. So that's why calories are still king. In another study, diabetics were divided into 3 different groups. This is titled Therapeutic Effects of Soluble Dietary Fiber Consumption on Type 2 Diabetes Mellitus. Group number 1 ate slightly higher than average fiber intake, which is 14 grams per day. Now, by the way, average does not mean good. Most people in North America are not that healthy, so average is like 10, 12 grams. So these ate slightly higher than average. By the way, government recommendations are between 25 and 38 grams. So they ate well below government recommendations, but above average. Moderate fiber intake group was 24 grams per day, and a high fiber intake, these people ate 34 grams of fiber per day. And here is what happened. The group that ate normal fiber, slightly higher than the North American average, they dropped their fasting blood glucose by 0.45 millimoles per liter, which is pretty good, which is like average good. Moderate fiber intake, they dropped their fasting blood glucose by 1.0 millimoles per liter. Now that's on par with diabetic medication, so pretty good. The high fiber group, they dropped their fasting glucose by 2.58 millimoles per liter with no other changes. They didn't introduce their carbohydrates, they didn't increase their protein, they just increased their fiber to 34 grams per day. So quite good. Now, there's also the claim that the keto diet reduces chronic inflammation. And the question is, are you inflamed to begin with? And we need to differentiate between cardiovascular inflammation and joint inflammation. Cardiovascular inflammation, you can look at the blood and see if you're inflamed. Joint inflammation, that's not the case. So here are some markers of cardiovascular inflammation. One of them is something called HSCRP. That is high sensitivity C-reactive protein. Another cardiovascular inflammatory marker is homocysteine, and a third one is called fibrinogen. This assesses your risk of clotting. So how does the keto diet affect chronic inflammation? Well, here's a study titled Impact of a very low calorie ketogenic diet on changes in hand grip strength in women with obesity. And the results were, yes, the keto diet did lower inflammation. The CRP dropped by almost 40%. So this is actually not unique to the keto diet. Lots of ways, there are lots of diets and things that aren't even diets that lower inflammation. For instance, the Mediterranean diet lowers inflammation. So does the paleo diet. It also lowers inflammation. Exercise lowers inflammation. So reduced inflammation is not something that's unique to the keto diet. Another claim that's made is that the keto diet builds muscle mass and bone mass. This is true if protein is adequate. But here's the thing. When you go into high protein territory, high protein can take you out of ketosis. So you have to ask yourself, what's more important to you? Being in ketosis for whatever reason, or building muscle? Sometimes they're mutually exclusive and sometimes they're not. That's where measurement comes in. If you raise your protein intake and your measurement says you're out of ketosis, well, then you have to make the decision. Is muscle more important to you, or is ketosis more important to you? And so who should not do the keto diet? This is just as important to know as who should do the keto diet. If you have pre-existing liver damage, you should probably not do the keto diet. If your liver is fine, it's not going to cause it to be damaged. But if your liver has pre-existing damage, that's when the problem happens. Another group of people who should not do the keto diet are people with pancreatitis, inflammation of the pancreas. Another group of people is those who have pre-existing kidney damage. And again, I emphasize pre-existing. If your kidneys are fine right now, the keto diet won't damage them. But if your kidneys are not fine right now, the keto diet will do more damage. And a fourth group of people who should not do the keto diet are people who have had their gallbladder removed, because the gallbladder helps with fat metabolism. And if you're on a high-fat diet, it makes it very, very difficult to metabolize without a gallbladder. In conclusion, at the end of the day, the three most important variables for overall health are very, very simple. The single most important thing is just total calories. Calories are king. And then kind of a tie between second and third most important are adequate fiber intake and adequate protein intake. The keto diet can definitely accomplish the total calories. It can meet those criteria. And if it meets those criteria, it's a good diet. But if it doesn't meet those criteria, it's not that good of a diet. And if you're wondering what is adequate protein intake, I go into that in extensive detail in my video on muscle building for older adults. So check that out on your screen right now or in the description below. Also, it is more difficult to get adequate fiber on the keto diet as lots of high fiber foods are also high in carbs. For example, here are the foods that are highest in fiber: black beans, lentils, peas, most fruits, and dried fruits. These are your best fiber sources. And unfortunately, they're also very high carb sources. So a lot of them will kick you out of ketosis. Now, if you're wondering why aren't any vegetables listed in this list, and that's because vegetables are not actually high in fiber. And I elaborate on why not in this video on your screen right now and in the description below. Now, bottom line, should you do the keto diet? And the answer to that is you should do the keto diet if you like foods that are common on the keto diet. Things like eggs, bacon, nuts, avocados, olive oil, and so on. Don't do the keto diet if you don't think you can stick to it long term. You can get the same benefits with other ways of eating. There's nothing that's uniquely beneficial to the keto diet that can't be accomplished with other diets or with other ways like exercise or certain supplements. So if you think you can maintain good compliance to the keto diet long term, go for it. If you don't think you can, don't worry about it. There's many ways to get the same benefits. If you want to learn more broadly about nutrition for seniors and older adults, I have an entire video on that topic, including what's different about nutrition for older adults compared to younger adults, as well as many more topics. Click on that on your screen right now or in the description below.